Hello, Sophia. We're back. We took a little break. I'm in my workout clothes because I worked out today. See my muscles? Muscles. Okay. We are going to be in the Old Testament and the New Testament today. So we're going to start in Exodus, and then we're going to jump ahead to the Gospel of John. So in Exodus, remember that is where the whole story of Moses leading the children of Israel out of slavery happens. And after they leave Egypt, they're kind of in the wilderness for a while before they settle in their own land. So chapter 16 is where we're going to start. We're jumping ahead just a little bit from the Red Sea incident. So they're in the desert, verse 2, chapter 16, verse 2. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." They're kind of complainers. Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" When Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needs. Take an omer," that was like a unit of measurement, "for each person you have in your tent." The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they gathered it by the omer, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered as much as he needed. So what we're seeing there is that they're running out of food, and they start to complain. "Would have been better if we had just been in Egypt. Even though we were slaves, at least we had food. You just brought us out here to die." And Moses and Aaron are like, "Why are you complaining to us? We didn't mastermind this whole thing. Talk to God about it." And God, instead of being mad at them, provides for them. And why do you think is the reason he says you have to gather it every day? What do you think? I think it's because he wants them to see that they can depend on him every day. When we're insecure and we're scared, sometimes we try and hoard things. We try and store them up. And actually, it tells us later here that when the Israelites tried to do that, there were some Israelites who would try and take more than they needed. It would rot. It would go bad. The only time that didn't happen was that on the day they weren't supposed to work, which was the Sabbath, like their holy day, they were allowed to, on the day before, gather twice as much. And then it wouldn't go bad because they were getting enough for that day and for the Sabbath. So it was to know that like every morning, God will provide enough for today. And tomorrow, we'll worry about tomorrow. But for today, he'll provide enough. So he provides manna, which is this kind of bread-like substance. And he also gives them quail, so they have meat. So God is taking care of the Israelites. And he responds to their fear with kindness. So then, if we jump into John, so we are in John chapter 6, and he says, we're not going to start at the very beginning of 6, but he says, verse 48, "I am the bread of life. Your forefathers ate the manna in the desert, yet they died. He's reminding them that God has sent bread before. God has taken care of them before. And that bread saved them for a little while, but they were mortal and eventually they died, right? So he says, I'm the bread of life. Your forefathers ate the manna in the desert, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which a man may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Then the Jews began to argue sharply among themselves. How can this man give us flesh to eat? Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in him. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so the one who feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven. Your forefathers ate manna and died, but he who feeds on this bread will live forever. He said this while teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. On hearing it, many of his disciples said, This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? So, that sounds kind of weird and creepy, right? Like we're supposed to be cannibals. What it is really is what becomes, Jesus is establishing what becomes known as the Eucharist, or the Lord's Supper, where we eat bread and we drink wine or grape juice, but that symbolizes Jesus's body and Jesus's blood. And what he's saying is, you take me in. You take in all of me, and it's as if you're eating me, but what it really means is Jesus sustains us, just like physical food sustains us. But he's saying, the physical food that you eat and that your forefathers ate, even though it was provided by God, was not going to sustain them forever. Eventually they would die. But this food is spiritual food, and it will sustain you forever. You will have eternal life. Now, we still die in our bodies, but he's saying your spirit will live, and you will be resurrected. And he's starting to talk in this language of resurrection, of eternal life and of coming back to life, which is a very strange thing, because at the time they believed that, maybe you go to sort of an underworld, like in Greek mythology, if you've heard of Hades, that was sort of a shadowy place where the dead went, and they were just kind of shadows of their old selves. So some Jewish people believed in that. They called it Sheol. Others believed that you were sort of in the presence of God, but really the focus was on the life here. And Jesus is saying, actually, I'm bridging the gap between your life here and the life in the world to come. Those two things are not as separate as you think. Eternity is now. We are participating in eternity now. And you do that by eating and drinking me. So not literally. And of course, that's what's confusing, is Jesus talks in riddles a lot. So that's why the people were like, is he going to cut off pieces of his flesh for us to eat? Because that's super weird. And Jesus is saying, you are going to have to consume me. So think about what happens when we consume something, right? When we eat it, it becomes part of us. Jesus is saying, I have to become part of you. I have to become part of everything about you, the thing that sustains you, the thing that you can't live without. And then I'm fully part of you, and that's what transforms you. But people are not crazy about that message, and we're going to see that they kind of start to turn on Jesus. And that's because when we start next week is what we call Holy Week. So it starts with Palm Sunday, which is the day when Jesus goes into Jerusalem, and lots of people are cheering him as oh, he's the King of the Jews. He's the one who's going to come to save us from this terrible Roman oppression. We've been kept down. If you remember from when we did Advent with the book of Luke, that part of what, they're no longer slaves in Egypt, but they are now oppressed by the Roman Empire. They're not slaves, but they don't have total freedom either. So they are governed by Rome, and Rome was not always the best governor. It was an empire that really just cared about making money, and didn't care about righteousness, which happens with any empire. That happens with America, which is sort of an empire that we become focused on money and power and not on the things that God cares about. So they're struggling under Roman rule, and so Holy Week starts with Palm Sunday, where everyone is cheering and they're, excited. And that week, though, is going to end with Jesus' death. And then on the next Sunday, Easter Sunday, the resurrection. So Holy Week is really kind of the most important week in the Christian calendar, because that's sort of the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus, which changes the whole world.